to show you how to hand sew this kid's blanket vest. You'll need the patterns from my pattern piece, a needle, yarn, scissors, and a label if you want to sew yours in. Okay, so I'm going to give you a slight little intro to blanket stitching the seams together. So you want to have the yarn that's doubled, so that way you have like a knot with like a loop at the end. So when you go through like the way I'm going through now, you can put like the thread through that to catch it, so that way it doesn't unravel and it just is like, I don't know, I think it's just like makes it like super secure. And then you go back up to the left hand side of it and up to like kind of create it almost, it looks like a continuous stitch. And then you go diagonally and down and through the loop, and you can kind of see it, although my hand's kind of covering it, but basically you're just like kind of making like a square out of it and then going through the loop. And you just want to make sure that you're getting a nice bite of the fabric underneath, so that way your seam is like really strong. On the pattern, there's no seam allowance on the center back, but because my scraps were too small, I needed to add like a 1/2 inch-ish for seam allowance. And for the pocket, it's very similar to what we just did on the back seam, but you want to just start up about a stitch length because you're going to do the hem in the blanket stitch. So what we basically do, it's one continuous yarn and you go through the side of the pocket. Once you're done with the corners and you get to the top part of the pocket, you want to not obviously go through both layers. You want to just go through that top layer. And then once you get back to the corner like I'm doing right now, you can see you just want to then connect it back to the base of the front of the pattern. And then you'll just continue to go down and match the other side that you just did. No, literally this little pocket is already stealing my soul. Okay, so cute. So then you're just gonna do the exact same thing to the other side. Make sure you drink your water, just a friendly reminder. Now it's time to do the shoulder seams. So you put the front on top of the back and you pin that, and then you sew, leaving that kind of like seam allowance or the blanket stitch allowance for the shoulder, but you'll want to go all the way to the edge for the neckline because you're going to cover that with the collar. So you just want to make sure you get like a nice tight edge on that. Then we're doing the side seam. We're moving along really fast. So again, we're doing where we leave the seam allowance for the blanket stitch on the hem, and we're going to go all the way up to the top for the armhole. And speaking of armhole, that's what's up next. So this one, honestly, this is when it also starts to get really easy, because now you're just doing a classic blanket stitch where you're just going around the edge and you don't have to really catch like another layer. You're just going around like where the seams hit on the shoulder seams. I like to try to make the stitches line up to make a square so it looks chic. Up next is the parameter of the collar. So you want to leave that kind of stitch length seam allowance around the inner part of the collar, because the next step we're going to be attaching the collar to the neckline, and that's when you'll sew that part. And now we're going to attach the collar. So you just line it up, you eye it out, you know, to make sure that the patterns and everything matches up. And then you go through and you just connect the collar to the neckline of the vest. This is genuinely when it just like really gets easy. I mean, I feel like this entire thing is so easy, but after the collar's on, it's really easy peasy, because then you just go around the whole, like the center front of the vest, the hem, and this is also where you'll start to enclose the pockets. I just love when the stitches line up where I can make a square with the previous stitches from when I laid down the pocket. Now you can see the pocket is done. So yeah, then you just continue around the entire bit and then you'll get right back to the collar. Yeah, wow, I mean like literally we're almost done. We're just sewing on the cute little tie. I also really love like a shoelace, and I'm obviously sewing in my cutest little label with Maybelline on it. Wow, and just like that, it's done. I really do think this is like an easy, nice introductory sort of pattern to do. You can also add snaps or buttons, but I love it with the bow.